The dim glow of a single candle trembles against the cracked plaster walls of a modest Madrid apartment in 1972. The air is thick with the scent of aged paper, incense, and something intangible, an unseen hum that seems to vibrate just beyond the edge of perception. Outside, the city pulses with the restless energy of post-Franco Spain caught between tradition and transformation. Inside, however, time feels unnervingly still. A man sits at a wooden desk, his hands trembling as he scribbles furiously into a leather-bound journal. This is Salvador Freixedo, once a devout Jesuit priest, now a self-proclaimed investigator of the unknown. His writings would later be dismissed by some as heresy, celebrated by others as visionary, but tonight, they are simply desperate. What makes this moment so extraordinary is not merely the content of Freixedo's notes, but the growing realization dawning upon him. Earth, he believes, is not what it seems. It is not a divine creation or a random accident of nature. It is a system, a meticulously engineered mechanism designed not to nurture life, but to harvest it. Each word he writes feels heavier than the last, as though the act of putting pen to paper is pulling threads from a tapestry too vast to comprehend. And yet, there is something more unsettling. A faint buzzing noise that seems to emanate not from the room, but from within his own mind. A sound that grows louder the longer he tries to ignore it. Among the scattered papers on his desk, one detail catches his eye, a smudge of ink at the corner of a page, shaped uncannily like an eye. He doesn't remember making it, yet its presence feels deliberate, almost mocking. Reports suggest that Freixedo had begun receiving messages from entities claiming to originate beyond human comprehension. These beings spoke not of salvation or enlightenment, but of humanity's true role in the cosmos. Livestock, mistaking the cage for the sky. As Freixedo leaned closer to examine the ink smudge, the candle flame flickered violently, casting jagged shadows across the walls. For a fleeting moment, he thought he saw movement in the periphery, a figure standing just beyond the light. When he turned to look, there was nothing there, only the lingering sensation of being watched. Then came the whisper, soft yet piercing, cutting through the silence like a blade. You cannot unsee what you have already seen. This story is not merely about one man's descent into the unexplained. It is an exploration of how our understanding of reality can fracture when confronted with evidence we cannot easily dismiss. As historian Dr. Elena Martinez observed, Freixedo's work forces us to consider whether the boundaries between science, spirituality, and the paranormal are as rigid as we assume, or if they might converge in ways we have yet to fully comprehend. The implications ripple outward. What happens when someone trained in the sacred traditions of the Church becomes a conduit for knowledge that challenges the very foundations of faith? And more importantly, what does this mean for our collective search for truth? Suddenly, the room grew colder, the candle sputtering as though struggling to stay alight. Freixedo froze, his breath catching in his throat. From somewhere deep within, the shadows, a voice, not his own, spoke again. This time, louder, clearer. The system knows you've started asking questions. Before he could react, the floor beneath him seemed to shift, tilting ever so slightly, as though the ground itself were alive and aware. At that moment, he realized the truth. Whatever force had been guiding these phenomena was no longer content to remain hidden. Salvador Freixedo's journey began not in rebellion, but in devotion, a path meticulously laid out by one of the Catholic Church's most intellectually rigorous orders, the Society of Jesus. Born in Galicia, Spain, in 1923, Freixedo grew up during a tumultuous period marked by civil war and ideological upheaval. Yet, amidst the chaos, he found solace in faith, eventually entering seminary training at an age when most young men were still discovering their identities. For years, he immersed himself in theology, philosophy, and scripture, rising through the ranks to become a respected missionary and scholar within the church. His intellectual rigor made him an ideal candidate for service abroad, where he was sent to Latin America, a decision that would profoundly alter the trajectory of his life. It was here, among the indigenous communities of South and Central America, that Freixedo first encountered phenomena that defied easy explanation. He witnessed ancient rituals, cryptic symbols carved into stone, and oral traditions describing encounters with otherworldly beings neither purely divine nor entirely malevolent. At first, these accounts seemed like mere folklore, echoes of pre-Christian animism, but over time, they revealed patterns too consistent to dismiss. As an anthropologist, Dr. Maria Gonzalez later noted, Freixedo wasn't content to accept these stories as cultural artifacts. He saw them as fragments of a larger puzzle, one that challenged the very foundations of Western religious thought. The turning point came when Freixedo began noticing parallels between these indigenous narratives and biblical texts. Accounts of celestial visitors manipulating human destiny appeared eerily similar across cultures, suggesting a universal experience rather than isolated mythologies. Moreover, he observed how institutionalized religion often suppressed such stories, framing them as heresy or superstition. This suppression struck him as deeply troubling, not because it betrayed dogma but because it stifled inquiry. Reports suggest that Freixedo became increasingly disillusioned with the Church's refusal to engage seriously with questions that lay beyond its doctrinal boundaries. By the late 1960s, after decades of internal struggle, Freixedo made the painful decision to leave the priesthood. It was not a rejection of spirituality, but a recognition that the answers he sought could not be found within traditional frameworks. "I did not abandon my faith," he wrote in his journal shortly after resigning. "Rather, I abandoned the structures that confined it." With this act of liberation, he embarked on a new mission, to investigate the unseen forces shaping human history and consciousness. In the years that followed, Freixedo dedicated himself to studying what he called non-human intelligences, entities operating just beyond the veil of ordinary perception. Drawing from theology, mysticism, ufology, and even quantum physics, he pieced together a startling hypothesis. Earth is not merely a planet teeming with life, but a system designed to extract emotional and spiritual energy from its inhabitants. These ideas crystallized in his groundbreaking work, The Human Farm, which argued that humanity exists within a carefully engineered matrix controlled by beings indifferent to our suffering or salvation. Freixedo's transformation from devout clergyman to controversial theorist underscores a central tension in his story: the conflict between institutional authority and individual truth-seeking. While skeptics dismissed his claims as speculative or fantastical, others recognized the depth of his scholarship. Dr. James Carter, a historian specializing in esoteric traditions, observed, "What sets Freixedo apart is not just his boldness, but his methodology. He approached fringe topics with academic discipline, grounding his arguments in cross-cultural evidence and historical documentation. As Freixedo stepped further away from orthodoxy, he attracted both allies and adversaries. Some former colleagues denounced him as a heretic, while others quietly supported his research, recognizing its potential to challenge entrenched beliefs. Among his key supporters was Dr. Laura Mendez, a psychologist who collaborated with him on studies exploring the psychological effects of belief systems. His insights forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about why humans cling to certain ideologies," she remarked. "He showed that belief isn't just a matter of conviction, it's a form of energy exchange." Thus, the stage was set for Freixedo's emergence as one of the 20th century's most polarizing figures. From his modest beginnings as a Jesuit priest to his role as a self-styled investigator of hidden realities, his journey exemplifies the timeless struggle between conformity and curiosity. And yet, despite his growing body of work, the greatest revelations and controversies were still to come. By the early 1970s, Salvador Freixedo had emerged as a polarizing figure, his ideas sparking both fascination and outrage. His groundbreaking book, The Human Farm, became a lightning rod for debate, drawing attention not only from fringe communities, but also from academics, theologians, and even government officials intrigued or alarmed by its implications. The escalating conflict surrounding his work stemmed not just from the radical nature of his claims, but from the growing body of evidence he presented to support them. One of the most significant turning points came during a series of public lectures in Madrid, where Freixedo shared accounts of encounters with non-human intelligences. Witnesses reported strange phenomena occurring during these events. Electronic devices malfunctioning, unexplained lights appearing in the sky, and an eerie sense of being watched by unseen observers. While skeptics dismissed these incidents as coincidences or psychological suggestions, others found them impossible to ignore. As journalist Carlos Mendoza wrote at the time, Freixedo's presentations weren't just speeches, they were experiences, ones that left attendees questioning everything they thought they knew about reality. The Catholic Church, unsurprisingly, took a dim view of Freixedo's work. Former colleagues denounced him as a heretic, accusing him of undermining centuries of doctrine with speculative theories. Yet, privately, some within the church expressed concern, not about the validity of his claims, but about their potential impact. A confidential memo later surfaced, written by a high-ranking Vatican official, which read, "If Freixedo is correct, then we must ask ourselves whether our own teachings have unwittingly served forces beyond human comprehension." This internal unease highlighted the broader stakes of Freixedo's revelations. If religions themselves were tools of manipulation, then no institution was immune to scrutiny. As word of his theories spread, Freixedo attracted both supporters and detractors. Among his most vocal advocates were individuals who claimed to have experienced similar phenomena firsthand. One such account came from Ana Rivera, a former nun who described visions of shadowy figures manipulating congregants during prayer sessions. "I saw them," she recalled. "Not with my eyes, but with something deeper. They fed on our devotion, our guilt, our fear. When I read Freixedo's books, it all made sense." Stories like Rivera's lent credence to Freixedo's hypothesis, suggesting that his ideas resonated beyond intellectual speculation. Yet, skepticism persisted. Critics argued that Freixedo's reliance on anecdotal evidence and cross-cultural parallels lacked scientific rigor. Dr. Roberto Silva, a physicist specializing in quantum mechanics, offered a measured critique. While Freixedo raises intriguing questions, his conclusions rest on assumptions that cannot be empirically tested. Until we develop methods to verify or falsify his claims, they remain speculative at best. Despite such reservations, even skeptics acknowledge the power of Freixedo's narrative, a testament to its ability to provoke thought and challenge entrenched paradigms. The tension reached a fever pitch when Freixedo began receiving threats. Anonymous letters warned him to cease his investigations, while several of his public appearances were disrupted by protesters. In one particularly harrowing incident, a fire broke out at the venue hosting one of his lectures, forcing attendees to evacuate. Authorities ruled the blaze accidental, but Freixedo suspected otherwise. "They don't want me to speak," he told a reporter afterward. "But silence won't protect anyone. If anything, it makes us easier prey." Amidst the chaos, Freixedo continued to refine his theories, drawing connections between ancient myths, modern ufology, and emerging research in consciousness studies. He pointed to cases of near-death experiences, NDEs, as further evidence of the system he described. Many NDE accounts featured radiant beings guiding souls toward a bright light, a phenomenon often interpreted as proof of an afterlife. But Freixedo offered a sobering alternative. What if those beings aren't benevolent? What if the light isn't salvation, but a trap designed to recycle souls back into the system? His interpretation unsettled many, forcing them to confront uncomfortable possibilities about life, death, and what lies beyond. As his reputation grew, so did the stakes. Governments began taking notice, particularly intelligence agencies interested in the intersection of paranormal phenomena and national security. Declassified documents revealed that U.S. officials had monitored Freixedo's activities, citing concerns that his ideas could destabilize societal structures. "The danger lies not in whether Freixedo is right or wrong," one report noted. "It lies in the fact that millions might believe him and act accordingly." Through it all, Freixedo remained undeterred. He viewed the mounting opposition not as a sign of failure, but as a confirmation of his theories. "If this system exists," he once remarked, "then resistance is inevitable. Those who benefit from ignorance will always fight to maintain it." But awareness is contagious, and once awakened, the soul cannot return to sleep. By the mid-1980s, Freixedo's influence had expanded far beyond Spain. Translations of his works appeared worldwide, sparking grassroots movements dedicated to exploring his ideas. Conferences, online forums, and underground networks formed, united by a shared goal: to uncover the truth about humanity's place in the cosmos. For every critic who dismissed him as a deluded eccentric, there was a believer convinced that he held the key to liberation. And yet, despite the growing movement, doubts lingered. Was Freixedo a visionary exposing hidden truths, or a brilliant storyteller weaving together fragments of myth and speculation? The answer remained elusive, but the questions he raised refused to fade. By the late 1980s, Salvador Freixedo's controversial theories had reached a tipping point. His book, The Human Farm, had become both a lightning rod for debate and a rallying cry for those seeking answers beyond conventional paradigms. But it was not just his writings that drew attention. It was the mounting body of evidence he presented, much of which defied easy explanation. Reports from witnesses, historical documents, and even government files began to surface, lending credenda to his claims in ways that neither skeptics nor supporters could ignore. One of the most dramatic incidents occurred during a lecture tour in South America. In Buenos Aires, hundreds gathered to hear Freixedo speak about non-human intelligence and the system of energetic extraction he described as the human farm. Midway through his presentation, the room was plunged into darkness as all electronic devices, lights, microphones, cameras, ceased functioning simultaneously. Witnesses reported seeing strange lights hovering outside the venue, while others claimed to feel an intense pressure in the air, as though an unseen presence was watching. When power was restored moments later, Freixedo stood frozen at the podium, visibly shaken. "They're here," he whispered before continuing his talk. The incident was captured on grainy video footage that circulated widely, fueling speculation about the forces Freixedo claimed were orchestrating humanity's existence. But perhaps the most compelling evidence came not from supernatural occurrences, but from patterns embedded within human history itself. Freixedo meticulously documented parallels between ancient myths, religious texts, and modern UFO encounters, arguing that these narratives were not disparate phenomena but fragments of a single, cohesive story. He pointed to Sumerian tablets depicting gods descending from the heavens, Hindu scriptures describing vimanas, flying chariots, and biblical accounts of divine visitations, all of which shared striking similarities with contemporary reports of alien abductions. To Freixedo, these stories were not proof of benevolent intervention, but evidence of a long-standing relationship between humans and their harvesters. As historian Dr. Elena Martinez noted, Freixedo's genius lay in his ability to connect dots others refused to see. Whether or not you agree with his conclusions, the patterns he identified are impossible to dismiss. Despite the growing body of evidence, institutional resistance remained fierce. Religious leaders condemned Freixedo's work as heretical, while scientists dismissed it as pseudoscience. Yet behind closed doors, some officials took his warnings seriously. Declassified documents revealed that intelligence agencies in both the United States and the Soviet Union had monitored Freixedo's activities, citing concerns that his ideas could destabilize societal structures. One memo from the CIA read, "If Freixedo's theories gain widespread acceptance, they could undermine faith in established institutions and provoke mass unrest." Containment. Strategies must be considered. This acknowledgement underscored the stakes of Freixedo's revelations. If religions and governments were tools of manipulation, then exposing the truth carried profound risks. As public interest in his work grew, so did the personal toll on Freixedo. He faced harassment, death threats, and attempts to discredit him. Critics accused him of fabricating evidence, while others suggested he suffered from delusions. Yet, despite the backlash, Freixedo remained steadfast. "I didn't choose this path," he once remarked. "It chose me. And if I am wrong, then nothing changes. But if I am right, then silence is complicity." The climax of Freixedo's journey came in 1992 when he published his final book, Defense Against the Gods. In it, he laid out practical steps for individuals seeking liberation from what he called the invisible prison. Drawing on decades of research, he argued that true freedom required radical self-awareness, a conscious rejection of externally imposed narratives, and an unwavering commitment to inner sovereignty. You cannot fight the system, he wrote, because the system thrives on reaction. Instead, you must neutralize it through stillness, through lucidity, through remembering who you truly are. Though Defense Against the Gods polarized readers, it marked a turning point in Freixedo's legacy. For every critic who dismissed him as a conspiracy theorist, there was a believer convinced that he had uncovered hidden truths. Support groups formed around his teachings, dedicated to exploring methods of emotional regulation and spiritual independence. Some practitioners reported profound transformations, claiming to experience heightened awareness and a sense of peace previously unknown. Others remained skeptical, questioning whether such practices amounted to anything more than placebo effects. The immediate aftermath of Freixedo's revelations was one of uncertainty. While his ideas failed to achieve mainstream acceptance, they sparked a quiet revolution among those disillusioned with traditional systems of belief. Conferences, online forums, and underground networks emerged, united by a shared goal: to uncover the truth about humanity's place in the cosmos. For many, Freixedo became a symbol of intellectual courage, a man willing to challenge the status quo in pursuit of deeper understanding. And yet, questions lingered. Was Freixedo a visionary exposing hidden truths, or a brilliant storyteller weaving together fragments of myth and speculation? The answer remained elusive, but the questions he raised refused to fade. As journalist Carlos Mendoza observed, "Whether you believe him or not, Freixedo forced us to confront uncomfortable possibilities about life, death, and what lies beyond. That alone makes his work significant." Salvador Freixedo's legacy is as complex as the ideas he championed. Though he passed away in 2019 at the age of 96, his work continues to resonate with those who dare to question the nature of reality. What began as a quiet rebellion against institutionalized belief systems evolved into a global movement, one that challenges not just religious orthodoxy but the very foundations of how we understand existence. His books, particularly The Human Farm and Defense Against the Gods, remain touchstones for researchers, philosophers, and seekers alike, offering a framework for understanding humanity's role in what he described as an engineered system of energetic extraction. One of the most striking aspects of Freixedo's legacy is its intersection with contemporary fields of study. In recent years, advancements in quantum physics, consciousness studies, and even artificial intelligence have begun to echo some of his core ideas. For instance, physicists exploring the nature of reality have posited that human perception may be far more limited than previously assumed, a notion Freixedo argued decades earlier. Similarly, researchers studying emotional resonance and collective consciousness have uncovered evidence suggesting that emotions are not merely subjective experiences, but measurable forms of energy. While these findings do not definitively prove Freixedo's theories, they lend credenda to his assertion that much of what we consider real exists within a carefully constructed matrix. Freixedo's warnings about manipulation through belief systems also find echoes in modern critiques of media, technology, and governance. The rise of digital surveillance, social engineering, and algorithmic control has led many to question whether humanity is being harvested, not just spiritually, but psychologically and economically. As journalist Laura Mendez observed, Freixedo saw the farm as a spiritual construct, but today we see its parallels in the digital age. Both systems rely on invisibility, distraction, and complicity. Both thrive on our willingness to believe without questioning. Philosophically, Freixedo's work forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about free will, autonomy, and the nature of the self. If, as he suggested, much of what we consider sacred, religion, love, suffering, is part of a larger mechanism designed to extract energy, then where does true freedom lie? For Freixedo, the answer was simple, yet profound: awareness. He believed that liberation begins not with external action, but with internal clarity. the ability to see beyond the narratives imposed by society and recognize the deeper forces at play. This emphasis on lucidity over dogma aligns with emerging trends in mindfulness and self-awareness practices, which emphasize detachment from external validation and focus on inner sovereignty. Yet, despite its intellectual appeal, Freixedo's vision remains deeply unsettling. Accepting his hypothesis requires confronting the possibility that much of what gives life meaning, faith, relationships, even joy, may serve purposes beyond our comprehension. It challenges us to redefine spirituality not as submission to higher powers, but as resistance to unseen forces. As historian Dr. James Carter noted, Freixedo didn't offer comfort, he offered clarity. And while clarity can be liberating, it can also be terrifying, because it demands responsibility. Once you see the cage, you can no longer pretend it doesn't exist. Perhaps the most enduring aspect of Freixedo's legacy is its invitation to continue questioning. Whether or not one accepts his theories, his work underscores the importance of skepticism, not as rejection, but as inquiry. By challenging entrenched beliefs and encouraging independent thought, Freixedo paved the way for future generations to explore the hidden architecture of reality. His final admonition, that true freedom requires brutal honesty, remains as relevant today as it was when he first penned it. In reflecting on Freixedo's contributions, we are left with more questions than answers. Was he a visionary exposing hidden truths, a brilliant mythmaker weaving together fragments of ancient wisdom, or something else entirely? The answer may never be clear, but what is undeniable is the impact of his ideas. They have sparked debates, inspired movements, and forced countless individuals to reconsider their assumptions about life, death, and everything in between. We stand on the precipice of new discoveries about consciousness, technology, and the cosmos. We would do well to remember Freixedo's words: "Awareness is the only weapon against the unseen." In a world increasingly shaped by forces beyond our control, his call to wakefulness feels less like a warning and more like a lifeline. For if there is any truth to his theories, then the greatest act of rebellion is not defiance, but remembrance, the courage to reclaim what was lost and awaken to what lies beyond the veil. Though Salvador Freixedo is gone, his whispers echo through the silent corners of our modern world. Was he a visionary, tearing away the veil of illusion, or a brilliant yet disturbed cartographer of the unseen, mapping the terrifying landscapes of belief and fear? The answer perhaps may never be clear, for the truth he sought lies beyond the tidy confines of our logic. Yet his legacy demands our attention. It forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility: that the very fabric of our reality, the deepest comforts of faith, the very cycle of life and death, could be part of a vast, meticulously engineered system. A system designed not for our salvation, but for our consumption. And if even a fraction of Freixedo's chilling vision holds true, then the greatest freedom lies not in finding a new god or a promised paradise, but in a brutal, lonely honesty. It lies in the courage to look beyond the light, to question every comfort, and to reclaim the sovereignty of your own awareness. For in a world where the cage is mistaken for the sky, the true act of rebellion is simply to remember who you truly are.